Nike back in the day, the simple ask of everything was, it was only two questions. What's the insight that suggests this project is legit or why? And what's the emotion you're going to try to create? That was it. What do you want someone to feel after the end of this project? That was it. We didn't get mired in all these other things.
Yeah.
I think once again, this idea of risk aversion, the human condition that can create possibility versus stifle it. And so what does that look like in the world today?
Dear friends, it's Kurt Derdix, and welcome back. And if this is your first time listening, I am so glad you found us, and this is your lucky day. I am so excited to share my conversation with my friend and mentor, Duke Stump. And friends of the show, you know how often I mention Duke's impact on my life, so I am beyond delighted to have Duke on to celebrate the milestone of the 50th episode of the Kurtie D Show. That's right, 50 episodes. So this is a very special conversation, and we want to really unpack some stuff that's changed my life, including Duke's pithy Duke-isms. They're amazing. He has this remarkable journey. He played pro hockey in Sweden. Then he became a Nike exec for 15 years. He's done a bunch of other incredible stuff. He's become a successful entrepreneur. But more than that, he's an amazing dad, great husband, great guy, great friend, and an amazing mentor. Duke and I collaborated during my time at Lime, where he was our CMO. And I just continue to learn and marvel in what Duke brings to the party. And in this episode, we celebrate the relaunch of his unique online gathering called Bonfire with Soul. This is a masterclass, Socratic inquiry into, really amazing principles, 12 principles delivered with beliefs, stories, takeaways, and burning questions. It's a profound experience for optimistic rebels of all sizes and stages, so you'll fit right in. So there's more to the story. So pressing rewind, Duke's powerful Imagine the Day exercise first transformed my life in 2008, propelling me out of the great financial crisis. I was in a ditch, and he gave me the insight that propelled a brave, bold new direction for the future. And fast forward to now, the same Imagine the Day exercise afforded me the guts and clarity to quit a high-paying job on my terms in 2022 and co-found a new business, Realworld Asset Group, a private credit fund. And this is true. Anytime I've invested in learning, the ROI has been exponential. So, for example, I invested $12K into a real estate mastermind in 2021 that led to me to meet my co-founder at Realworld. And I can point to so many other examples of how self-directed study has helped make my dreams come true. So Duke's Bonfire with Soul experience offers these insights in ways that incept, root, and bear fruit. So if you want brightness, aliveness, energy, impact in your day, I encourage you to absorb this conversation and reimagine what dreams you can make come true. So without further ado, friends, here's Duke. Duke Stump. It is so good to see you, my friend. I've been so excited, looking forward to this episode for a long time. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Kurtie D. It's just good to see your face today. Thanks, man.
I think it looks like, from the looks of where you are, it looks like you're at the home office in Ojai. Is that right?
I am indeed. Yeah. We had this old garage and horse stalls that we converted to a guest house and an office. You know, when you live in Ojai, when you live in places that people love to visit, you have a lot of guests. So we were like, we need some place for everyone to stay. So it's worked out well.
Well, and I gave you a buzz a couple of weeks back. We had that hurricane where we had a hurricane hit LA, and then we had a 5.1, and I think the epicenter was in your backyard. And I was so glad to hear that you were okay. But it sounds like it was a little bit of a scare, hey?
Yeah, it was literally like a half mile away, the epicenter. And it's interesting. I mean, when those quakes happen, obviously, it's just you don't know what to think or do. I'm grabbing the wall behind me, which was clearly of no use. But the thing for me is it's the aftershocks, that happen the next few days. You get a couple like 3.0 jolts, and it's like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
And obviously, we have a bunch of animals. The animals are not keen on the quake situation, but
Well, I'm glad that, yeah, I'm glad everybody's okay. And, the stuff that broke was all replaceable. So, well, that's, we are in California. So, well, I'm so excited about this episode for so many reasons. And it just happened to kind of line up as my 50th episode. And, having, you as one of my, best mentors and teachers and friends and audience members that listen to the show will probably know your name by now because I reference you at least it seems like once or twice a show. And one of the things I want to get into is the duke-isms, so that'll be a lot of fun. And it just so happened to line up, I think, with you doing the next iteration of your online workshop, Bonfire with Soul. So I'm excited to dig into that. And as I was reflecting, Duke, on this episode and kind of rewinding, I met you 16 years ago this month, August of 2007. If my memory serves me, I think it was in August. And, ironically, it was in the men's room of a Mexican restaurant. I think we were washing my hands or something. I was like, hey. And then you happened to be the guy speaking and you were so good. And I was like, oh my God, that was the dude from the John. And I was like, I got to go make friends with him. And what you shared that day was like, it was spiritual in the context of like, it was auspicious with the content that was really resonant, but the context of what I was evolving. And, I reference all the time on the show the Imagine the Day kind of framework. That's what we're going to call the episode. And it was not long after meeting you that you kind of walked me through that exercise. And and I think you were even referencing bonfires back then, if my memory serves correct. Do you remember what the content was?
I don't remember the specific focus point of the talk. I mean, I remember, actually, the irony is I remember meeting you. I remember we were on the second floor of this restaurant and, even thinking about our chat today, I just marvel at that moment and where life has taken both you and I, and specifically you. Like, you were nice with your words up front, but I think, my parents were high school teachers and they always said teaching was about mentoring and being mentored. And I think what's beautiful in our journey together is perhaps I've mentored you in some ways, but you've mentored me. I mean, I'm not just saying this, like you, from that moment in the bathroom, restaurant to where what you've done is, it's deeply inspiring, man. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I guess I heard it. Yeah. It's, I guess it's that cliche when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and all that we get into one of the duke-isms about the conditions for magic. So yeah, you've had such a big impact on my brother Christopher as well. I know, in his journey, and he did a podcast, and your friend Gregor was on it, and Gregor passed away, and there's a lot of really interesting artifacts and things that we have been able to share in that context.
I spoke with Christopher, I think about a month or two ago, and we were reflecting on, it was called Get Over Here. I think Over Here. It was called Over Here.
Yeah.
And it was so ahead of its time. Like now you can pop that concept in today's world and it would be really magical. But I think technology and community and all these different networks didn't exist. But I also am so grateful that we got to hear Gregor Barnum in that conversation. I mean, for those listening, Gregor Barnum was the director of corporate consciousness at Seven Generation when I left Nike and went to Seven Generation to be the CMO. And he was one of those guys who every day would just provoke you in the most amazing way. Be like, I would say something and he would like question, like, is that true? Like, I'd be like, competition or something. He'd be like, why do we need competition? And he's like, that's an outdated, archaic model. And he was such a gift to this world. And sadly, he passed away early from cancer. But that time I had with him we literally spoke almost every day. And I just love the fact that, once again, he lived in inquiry and he challenged. He would always say, "We got to burn dogma, man. We got to burn dogma." I actually love that.
Yeah, we'll have to track that interview that my brother Christopher did on his podcast over here with Gregor, and link to that in the show notes. And you know, kind of one more sort of reflection and acknowledgement as we get in is, you know, I just love your family. Your wife Molly and your two daughters are just amazing, and it's been remarkable watching them grow up. And as I've gotten married and we're getting ready to start a family, you know, the Stumps are definitely a template for how it's done well. So
I appreciate that. I mean, I got really lucky. Molly, my wife, is, you know, I think we've been together almost 28 years now. And our two daughters, Piper and Sid, are 25 and 23. And when I look at who they are in this world, you know, in many ways, they're a mirror of what Molly, I think, had nurtured over the years. And so it's funny, we talk a lot about life, about all these professional achievements, but the reality is, I think being able to raise, for me, strong, independent women is like, that's the thing for Molly and I that we're most proud of in this world. And so,
yeah,
it was incredibly fortunate to meet Molly.
Yeah, job well done. I love the there's some incredible videos of you talking about how you guys met and kind of the Love Actually story. So for folks that want to dig in, some of Duke's videos on recounting their romance is pretty epic. So kudos to that. And then, you know, the career that you've had is so fascinating. And what, you know, we could talk for a long time about each one of these things. So I'm going to have to be judicious and efficient in my editorial attempt here. But like, you know, you played some pro hockey in Sweden, right? Out of school. My memory served me well?
I'm an average golfer and I was an average hockey player, but I was fortunate. I left played hockey at University of Vermont, and then I went to play a year of hockey in Sweden. And I mean, once again, I was a good athlete, not a great athlete, but just the experience to live in Sweden. My mom's Swedish, you know, my whole family on that side. So it just was for me a terrific, not just hockey experience, but cultural experience.
Yeah. I've been Sweden once or twice. Beautiful. Love it there. Yeah, they're incredible exporters of music and creativity and, you know, tech and a lot of other great stuff. So, and then out of school, you were in Nike, right? Was that your first kind of job out of after playing hockey?
Yeah. Once again, I just somehow was fortuitous and to land this job at Nike called an Econ, and it's Nike spelled backwards. And it's this really revered role. There's like, I can't remember the exact number, maybe 35 Econs across the globe. And you're the eyes and ears of the brand, and you have to know Nike forward and backwards. So Econ is Nike spelled backwards. And that was my first role. And arguably it was my most precious, most appreciated role that I've had in the 30 plus years of working. It was amazing. And I spent roughly 16 years at Nike.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you did so how long were you in Econ, and what was the career trajectory through Nike? You did product and you got into doing some marketing exec roles.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I love things that are nascent or struggling. Like and so my career was, you know, I started as an econ at Nike, and then I wanted to go into product, and they said, hey, to go in product, you have to go into sales. And the whole premise there was you have to understand what it's like to be on that side of the table. If you're creating product, you have to have
Love that.
Yeah, it was actually invaluable.
Yeah.
But footwear at the time was the cool kid, and they wanted me to be an apparel rep. And I never forget the head of sales was like, hey, I was living in Manhattan Beach in LA, living the good life. And they're like, we want you to go into apparel sales, and your options are New York, Dallas, or Honolulu. And I think I'll stay in LA for a while. And the next day, we came back to follow up on the conversation at breakfast, and they're like, New York, Dallas, or Honolulu. And I'm like, I guess LA is not an option. They said no. And so I went to Hawaii as an apparel rep. That was just a hoot. I had this mammoth territory. It was all the Hawaiian Islands and everything between there out to Guam and Saipan. And man, it was hard work, but I loved it. I really loved it. I was like, I'm learning sales from a different perspective. Then I went into product, then I went into brand, and then I joined a subsidiary hockey company. They bought this company called Bauer, and I became the VP of product. And I think in my heart of hearts, I'm a product guy, not a brand guy. I like the creation of that, and like design, developers, engineers, sourcing. I just that whole matrix of activity is a cool jigsaw puzzle for me. Um, and then I left after 15 and a half years.
Yeah. Yeah. The product, that's probably the builder in you. I would think somebody like to see something that takes a life of its own and that, and then you left Nike, and some said it was career suicide, and you went to Seventh Generation, which is now a very well-known brand, but it was kind of unknown at the time.
Yeah, it was interesting. I wasn't unhappy at Nike. In fact, I was really comfortable, but I had an amazing mentor who would always be like, make yourself uncomfortable because it's one of the few times you're growing. I met Molly, my wife. She was at Nike for 8 years. In fact, she was an amazing. She led running apparel at one point, so she was incredible. And but I was like, I can envision the next 16 years, and that kind of bummed me out. Actually, I was like, I don't want to. And then there was other things. I lived through the labor crisis at Nike, and that really kind of shifted my perspective on like, well, what is it about corporate responsibility that is out there that's intriguing? And so yeah, I landed at Seventh Generation, 50 people, $50 million, and I went back home. I went back to Burlington, Vermont. That's where I went to school.
Yeah, the story I remember you saying is you kind of walked into the new team at Seventh Gen or something. I'm going to probably butcher this, so please correct me. But you're like, hey, I'm not really sure why they hired me. I don't really know anything about marketing, and you guys are smart, and we got a week to figure it out. And then reconvene a week later, and you guys came up with a big idea that got a big result. Is that safe to say?
Part of that is accurate. I mean, I did it the first all hands. I said, hey, it's great to be here. And I said, like, I don't really know what marketing is. And I can say that truthfully today. I get lost in these words and what they mean. And but I said I do believe and understand, and I'm curious about what it means to create resonance and relevance in this world. Like that's a different conversation for me. And then I was blessed, man. The team was small. We had no money, but we had absolute rock stars on the team, and not just on the brand team, but across the company. It was just like I couldn't believe that those 50 people were there at that moment, and then we just went on a really amazing ride, truthfully. And years later, after I left, Unilever bought them for like $1 billion or something.
Yeah. What was the thing that you're most proud of or grateful for your time at Seventh Gen?
I think a lot of times when you come from Nike and you go to someplace else, everyone's like, hey, can he do this without the embarrassment of riches? Resources, financial, human. Like at Nike, you do have a lot of things to play with. And at Seventh Generation, we had like virtually like a small amount of money. And so what I'm proud of is that I didn't operate from a playbook, but I operated from a set of principles. And also I think just proud of the team and what they were able to bring. Like here's an example. We were like, all right, Target wanted we wanted to go to Target, but we didn't want to call Target because once you call them, you lose all leverage and you have to pay national campaign fees, what they call slotting fees. And we didn't have the budget for that. So our whole strategy on the brand side of this in tandem with sales was like, what do we need to do to get Target to call us? And that was our like mantra each day. All right, what are the conditions that would allow Target to call us? And Christy Heimert, who was leading PR, and she was leading PR at Ben & Jerry's prior to Seventh Generation. What she and the brand team did is we partnered with this individual, Simran Seti, who was leading the Greed movement. And then she became the voice of our brand. But Christy got us on Oprah, Ellen, and Martha Stewart all within like the span of 30 days.
That's amazing.
It was like the sea parted, man. It was like crazy after that. And then sure enough, Target called us, and I remember flying to Minneapolis with sales. And I don't get too high or too low, but in that moment I was like, I'm not going to lie to you, man. This feels so good to be going there and not pleading, but them saying, hey, can we partner? Mm-hmm. But I'm proud of the fact that, once again, it wasn't a playbook, but it was a philosophy and a different approach around how to build something. And I do think that's a caveat for most people is just because something works in one culture doesn't mean that playbook is transferable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was such a gutsy and risky thing. And I think that's, looking at the Bonfire principles, one of the 12 unique principles is dare to suck, And, you guys definitely dared to suck because you could have just, come up empty-handed in that strategy.
But this is where the human condition is so important. I just spoke with him last week because he's going to be a guest in my course, Bonfire with Soul. But Jeffrey Hollander, the founder and the CEO of Seventh Generation at the time, we were reminiscing about, that moment. And I said, I just have to say flat out, what I most appreciated about working with you was that you were bold. You allowed bold endeavors. Mm-hmm. Like I would come with and the team and I would come with some crazy ass shit. And, normally it's like, well, what's the ROI? And I'm like, there's enough signals to suggest this, right? But I can't give you this definitive metric, especially a financial metric. And Jeffrey was always like, let's do it. Let's do it. Like he allowed us to play and create in a way that we had autonomy, but also really importantly, by the way, we had accountability. We had to deliver.
Yeah.
But what happens a lot right now, Curdy D, is people don't even get to that place of playing. Like it's stifled or cut short because someone will be like exhausted in terms of trying to kill the idea. Which is interesting because everyone loves Rick Rubin right now because what he's creating and doing. And he's not sitting there like asking himself like all these financial metrics or predictive models. He's built on sensing and feel, intuition, clear decision-making strategy, and then he creates. And not everything goes well, but for the most part, I would say he's been wildly successful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that sort of harkens back to like, a simpler time. I mean, I'm thinking of like David Ogilvy, like the legendary, marketing guru. And, and then I started thinking about Mad Men and, these people that would create these campaigns and they would, create a word of mouth. You build a good product and try to do a good job telling the story and let sort of the rest take care of itself. And we're setting up this fund right now, and it's been so much work. It's been an incredible learning journey, and when we're setting up fund and you're taking money from people, you're a fiduciary, and you have to be very careful. And the accountants and the tax people you're dealing with, are really important. And I was just talking to an accountant today, and I was like, why are taxes so hard these days? It just gets more complex. And he's like, it's because of computers. I'm like, what do you mean? I said, well, it's like they can kick out a new K2. You get a K1. It's easy for them to kick out a K2. We can only charge you $1,000 to do it, but it costs us $5,000 of work. If the IRS had to do all this by hand, they wouldn't make it so complex. But because, they're able to generate all through computer, it just makes all this complexity. And it's kind of a long way around of saying like, with marketing and now, like the classic, kind of outbound storytelling, everything gets so optimized for inbound metrics and Google and trying to generate leads. And And there's a lot of art and incredible stuff with that, but there's also a cost and a downside. And I think, back to the finance thing too, like, as I get into this world, like all the asset managers get benchmarked relative to their, cohort, and it's all ratio driven. And, it's like, oh yeah, if everybody's also losing money and we don't lose as much money as the next guy in our category, then we outperform the benchmark. But it's like, that's bullshit. Like, you shouldn't lose money at all. Like, I mean, I'm being a little bit naive about it, but like, I guess what I'm trying to talk about is this idea that like we've gotten, maybe too smart for our own good with all the data and technology to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, I share this a lot. Data is not the meta thought; it's the tool. It's a tool, and it's an important tool. Like, it can be incredibly helpful in decision making and strategy. What's lost is the art form, and I think we tend to live in safe havens. We become risk averse. We love predictive outcomes. If I do X, Y will happen, and if there's any other thing, I don't care about it, or I'm not. I just want to live in that zone. But that comes at the expense of possibility. It comes at the expense of greatness a lot of times. Like, here's two quick stories. At Nike, when onboarding, I was in Econ, like as I said earlier. I get to Prefontaine Hall, which is this magical place on Nike campus in Oregon. And Nelson Ferris is the Nike historian. He just retired after 50 years. And he gets in front of us, and we're in this little hall, theater area. And for the first 20 minutes, he talks about all the things that Nike has done awful all these mistakes, these glorious mistakes that have happened up to this point.
Love that.
And then he obviously would wax poetic about Nike, but his intention in that first 20 minutes was such a gift. He was basically saying, we demand greatness. And by demanding that, we know that there's going to be glorious mistakes. And so you have a permission slip to create, knowing that you might fail at something.
Yeah.
And it was just, don't make the same mistake twice. And then, so I forever am grateful. And Nike back in the day, the simple ask of everything was only two questions. What's the insight that suggests this project is legit, or why?
Yep.
And what's the emotion you're going to try to create? That was it. What do you want someone to feel after the end of this project?
Mm-hmm.
That was it. We didn't get mired in all these other things. Yeah. I think, once again, this idea of risk aversion, the human condition that can create possibility versus stifle it. And so what does that look like in the world today? And the other quick story is I was on the board of an amazing hotel company called 21C Hotels. It was art hotels, or they are art hotels, founded by Steve Wilson and his wife, Laura Lee. And he had this idea that they're pretty significant contemporary art collectors. And he's like, I'm going to create hotels built around our art. And his financial team was like, there's no precedent for this. This is a bad idea. Like, we can't do this. And then sure enough, he had like 8 locations, all 8 are in the top 100. And he ends up selling to Accor, the big behemoth out of Paris, which owns Fairmont and others. But it could have easily been rejected if it was just on no precedent and it sounds risky.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, no, I want to bring art to the world, and I don't need to go to the big cities. I'm going to go to Oklahoma City. I'm going to go to, Durham. I'm going to go to Cincinnati, Lexington, St. Louis, etc. I think it's interesting. We all want greatness, but we're not willing to have the courage to accept what it will quite often takes to get there.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that Nelson Mandela quote. I don't know if he's the one that actually came up with the quote, or if he was riffing on someone else, but it's this idea that it's not failure we're afraid of, but it's success. But yeah, something around the it's not failure we're afraid of, but it's success, because the insight is around that if we try to do something we fail, then it's like, even more painful than not trying. And
Yeah, maybe it's a nurture thing, but my mom was always fond of saying like the two worst words you can go to bed with are saying "if only,"
Mm-hmm.
and so that's been a driver for me. So when I make decisions that I think for a lot of people seem wildly irrational, I think for me it goes back to like, no, I'm comfortable if it doesn't go well. I'm not comfortable if I didn't even consider it or try it, and going to seventh generation from Nike, people literally like, you're the biggest idiot there is in the world. And I'm like, no, I'm good actually. This feels right.
Yeah, I just got the chills because what came to mind in my life, I had that, you'll never know if you don't try and you'll always regret it or wonder if you didn't, is when I quit my job at Esri on good terms and sold my house in Ventura. I moved up to San Francisco to Chase Holden, who was now my wife. And she was just basically like, if you want to try to make something work with me, like you gotta, it's not going to work if you're down there and I'm up here. And she was also giving me great insight that, you've been at Esri almost 6 years and like, you get to 7 and you're going to be a lifer. And if you're in tech, like people start to like wonder like, what's going on with you? Are you just like a bureaucrat able to just hang out? And, whether that's true or not at large is, a whole nother discussion. There's a lot of people that are doing their life's work at that organization, and it's a world-class organization because of the continuity. But for me, I think like you, I love starting new stuff. I love to try to, I'm more of a pioneer, and she had that insight, and that was the thing that was one of the things that I was like, holy smokes, like, if I'm just going to be content, because I was very content and comfortable, this is not going to probably end well for me. I'll probably just end up like drinking too much and enjoying, and sure enough, I went up there and it all worked out.
I think what you said is accurate though, is like what was right for you. And I think that level of self-awareness or self-understanding is the key ingredient in any journey, truthfully.
I appreciate you making that insight about that was for me, because that was my truth, and I rolled the dice, and it was risky. I did quit a really good gig, and I sold a beautiful house that I some days I wish I still had, but that gave me the capital to be able to afford to take a risk, and then I met up. I didn't know what I was going to do. I ended up taking that little gig at Lime, and jammed on that for a little bit, and for better and for worse, we roped you into that whole situation. Yeah,
Journeys, learnings.
Yeah, totes. So it was very gracious of you to be willing to come back on the show, because like it helped relax me a little bit, because there's so much content I want to go over with you, and we haven't even got into the awesome story at Lulu, and most importantly the Bonfire with Soul stuff. But one of the things as I was reflecting on the show was these Duke-isms that I just like. They're like these it's like that movie Inception, and they plant that little seed in your brain, and it's just all of a sudden this idea grows, and you have such a gift with these pithy little, they're like word worms, and they just like infect your brain, and for me it's in the most positive way. Imagine the day being one of them, widen the lens, quiet our cleverness, complex is easy, simple is hard. You've referenced this one already in the show. We can't create the magic, but we can create the conditions for the magic. And the one that really, really helped me out so much that relates to Imagine the Day is the question, what does the world need the most that I'm most uniquely qualified to deliver? And I guess having said that, was that something that you always did as a kid? Did you always have like the pun or the quip, or is that something that you developed? And why do you think there's such powerful devices?
Well, I think a couple things. One is in some of those, it's actually not my words. Like quiet our cleverness. I mean, that can go back to Rumi. But Janine Benyos from Biomimicry is the one who really surfaced that for me in a powerful way. I'm obsessed with language. Like I just took a poetry class that kicked ass. Um, but I feel like language has the ability to pierce through the barbed wire of life when it's done well, and yet I think we lose a lot. And so maybe the pithy comment, the statements for me are more about like just trying to do that versus create this long Tolstoy-esque, communication. It's funny when I left Seventh Generation, I don't know if it was a beautiful thing that they were loving or if they were taking a punch at me, but they created this amazing thing. And it was called the Duke. It was called the Dictionary, and it was all different. It was.
The,
I still have it today. I laugh my ass off.
oh my gosh, the Dictionary. That is amazing. What, to quote yourself, what's your favorite Duke-ism from the Dictionary?
I think the one I like the one that resonates right now the most is just this whole idea of the goal is not to create magic, it's to create the conditions for magic to happen. Life always focuses on we got to create this magic. And because of that, I think our energy and behavior is different than if we just focused on creating the conditions. So, for example, imagine a day, the exercise, we could talk about it. It's not about I'm going to get this job and it's going to be this and this. It's none of that. It's what are the conditions that make you feel free and alive in a way that then you can start to build into that life and that world. Like that's the key piece.
Yeah.
Or in business, I think financials are not a predictor of success. They're a function of doing these other things well. So rather than just focus on the financials every day, which are important, focus on these other things that will deliver the numbers. And that's that to me is the focus.
Finance is a lagging indicator.
Yeah, but that's not what we're taught, right? We're taught every day. We're taught we need to create competitive matrix. We need to look at the financials. Like I pride myself on going to places where we not only hit numbers, but crush numbers. I pride myself on never being over budget in anything I've ever done in 30 plus years. And I pride myself on not focusing on the financials to get there. To me, that's not what is required.
I want to loop back to Imagine the Day because, that's so fundamental to this conversation. But this idea that you're talking about, when you pride yourself on that kind of those numbers and or that result, which is incredible. What are the can you give examples of leading indicators that are there things that you've measured? Whether it's like, thank you notes or things where customers will send reviews, or how would you kind of think about what, if you're in the business of doing something that's, I'm not articulating the question as good as I'd like to, but I think you might get the gist of what I'm asking.
Yeah, let's see if I understand it well. So I'll start with one of the greatest things I learned as an econ was we were required to hone this craft of sensing in signals. And the whole thing was like you had to be constantly attuned and responsive and aware of these signals and these things. And it sounds crazy, but like I remember my first monthly report of like, hey, black shoes are selling. And my boss was like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. What's happening? What are you seeing and sensing? And that was the most amazing gift because it just put my radar up around all these things. Like I didn't go to Lululemon because I love black stretchy pants. I went to Lululemon because I thought the mindfulness movement was really starting to evolve and become a bigger part of this world. Like that goes all way back to the econ days. So I think sensing signals are one element of it. And then it's funny, I had this conversation last night with some friends. Success can be financial metrics, no question. Like we have goals. Okay, cool. I think it's really beautiful when you also create a set of success moments that are different. So I'll give you an example. When I got to Lululemon in the fall of 2014, it was listed by Wall Street Journal as the number one brand that wouldn't exist in 2015. And so it was a tough time for the brand. And I would have these weekly bonfire meetings with my team. And, it was a global team of about 300 people. And I remember asking them, like, what does success look like for us here? Forget the numbers for a second.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the individuals, she was like, I want to love Christmas parties again. And I was like, okay, all right. I'm not sure I understand you. Tell me more. She's like, I used to love going to Christmas parties, telling people I worked at Lululemon, and people were like, oh, that's super cool. Now if I go, people are like, give me the stink eye. That ain't cool.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, we would joke throughout the year, like, she's going to have a great Christmas party. Like, that was this success metric. And so I think the signals, and even our metric at Lululemon is our primary metric, and I know sounds crazy, was social sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
We were like 40% positive, and like, we got to get to 70. And if we get to 70, that is a great signal. And so that was our main driver, was social sentiment.
Yeah, I love it. I love the principle-based thinking, because there's not going to be like a cookie cutter answer. And this gets into one of the values that we're building out at Realworld Asset Group, is this value of don't confuse the map from the terrain. And, anytime you build a map, it's a representation, it's a model. And fundamentally, the model is always going to have some distortion or imperfection. Even in the real world with map, you have to update the projection schemes, because like the world moves a little bit, and it might only move a couple of feet, but and what we're doing with lending money and in the financial environments with interest rates and stuff, like it is, what's happening in the macro and the local, like you have to really, to your point, be sensing what's happening in these regional markets and that sort of thing. And so what we use as a sensing metric is going to be completely different than what somebody else in the apparel business might be doing. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've been so successful, is having a first principles approach to whatever it is that you're doing, and trying to get grounded in kind of what is reality, and what are those nuances that you can start to look at that can give you a sense of what's happening on the ground in the terrain, and not just getting confused with your face stuck in the map or in a spreadsheet, or, driving, looking at the rear view mirror at what everybody else is doing, when you should be focusing on sensing the emerging future as you're out in the environment.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, life is about impermanence. It's this mercurial, ever changing, ever flowing thing. Like, we don't have control on much other than maybe our chosen response to things. And I think because of that, every great culture company is just constantly attuned and responsive to what's happening. Like, budgets are notorious for, like, a budget is great for its first day, and then it's going to change because the world's changing.
Yeah.
Things change. Like, it's basically a directional piece, but it's not a concrete, like, seminal don't touch piece. Like, it needs to change and shift and evolve as things around it shift and evolve.
Yeah.
And that is where I think sensing, this is more philosophical, but I think about what we're taught around things in school. And I think about all these other really great gifted things we should be learning, like conflict resolution, sensing, decision making, empathy, empathetic leadership. Like, those are not part of our daily curriculum, and yet I find those are the things that are invaluable in determining whether something's flourishing or languishing.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into the Imagine the Day bit, in the context that, so many of us, especially now in this day and age, we don't have like a career path that we go down and we check in for 35 years at a company and retire with a pension. And I'm on my fourth career. You're embarking on this new thing that you're doing that's beautiful, or you're taking a bet on yourself. And I think for me, and when I met you, I had been in the real estate business for 5 years out of college, and which was good and great. until '08 happened, and great financial crisis completely wiped me out, and I lost my house, I lost my car. It was so humbling. And September of 2008, almost 15 years ago, to the month coming up, you walked me through this Imagine the Day exercise, and you're like, Curdy D, if you were to do a design exercise about what your future would look like, because I had asked you, like, hey, I had gotten into, started doing this tech stuff, and I was kind of hanging around with a whole new crew that I was energized about, and I had asked you for like career advice, and this was your response, was Imagine the Day, and you said, and this really speaks to your complex is easy, simple is hard principle, and you're like, Curdy D, like, if you could ask yourself like the key questions that would give you the answers, what would those questions be? And you kind of helped me out. You're like, you gave me a few clues. You're like, where would you be working? Who would you be working with? What would you be working on? How would you be feeling when you're working? And that led me to like, oh, okay, I want to do something that's in tech and software. That was sort of answered like the sector question. What sector do I want to be in? And you helped me. And I was thinking, all right, what kind of customers do I want? I don't want to deal with a consumer anymore. I want a professional buyer. So that led me down to a B2B path, business to business. And then it was like, oh, I want to be on an airplane once a month, flying, getting paid to travel, getting paid to learn, getting paid to meet new people. And I want it to be a social enterprise, So I had a handful of requirements. It was very, very, when it got all down to the essence, it was a very short, simple list of requirements. And within 3 months of doing the exercise, Duke, I met my technical co-founder, Jason, for City Sourced. And within 12 months of doing it, we were on the main stage at TechCrunch conference, and we took third place. And, it was like literally out of an episode of Mike Judge's Silicon Valley. In fact, it's that same conference that I was at, like, as a sponsor at Esri, when they did the Mike Judge, they were filming that thing, and I had that whole experience, and it was so surreal being in the building with the TV show coming through, filming an experience, and then watching it. And this is crazy. This is a crazy thing. It used to be at the Design Center at 8th and Brannan in San Francisco. And they demolished that building, and they built a new building that was an EQT luxury apartment that my girlfriend at the time, Holden, I moved in with her, and it was on that site. And we're literally watching that episode of Silicon Valley, Mike Judge, on the site in the thing where it was like 3 dimensions of absurdity. Anyways, I digress. But I think this is in a weird way, like, maybe more evidence of like this really wild, powerful, metaphysical thing that happens when we truly do imagine the day. And maybe in the future, at some point, the scientists will, figure this stuff out, and there'll be actual, I know Elon's working on all the, the brain stuff, and, but I think what it is it's this integration between the mind and the emotion. And then integrating that into the exterior. So that's internal integration that gets interfaced with the external. And I think there's such power and magic in it. And to your point about creating the conditions for the magic, the Imagine the Day exercise for me created the conditions for me to reimagine what the next chapter and volume of my career and life. And it has been remarkable. And I am so grateful being here in this beautiful house, and just, in this with my beautiful wife. It's like a Talking Head song, like, and here we are. And I am so grateful, and I so thank you for that. And I am one of your Pied Pipers to riff on Silicon Valley. Out there, spreading the good word about, these ideas. And I know in the last, when I was at Hunt Club for a few years, helping people, And going through COVID, I met so many people that had great academic and professional backgrounds, and finding themselves laid off for the first time. And I took probably hundreds of people through this Imagine the Day exercise to this point, and I got great feedback, so curious your reaction to that. And before we started pressing record, you had also shared that you have some additional context or kind of a part B to the exercise or insight too.
Yeah, I mean, just some background for people around Imagine a Day. It was passed on to me by others and over the years. And when I was at Nike, when I was at the place of deep contemplation, like, do I go or don't I go? I needed something to tether myself against so that I used to make some wild ass decision. And basically the premise is your 2 feet hit the ground in the morning and you're really stoked for the day. And you just describe what an amazing day looks like. You don't talk about what your job title is. You don't talk about other things. And if you have a spouse, a partner, they're involved in that because it's not just your quote unquote 9 to 5 Imagine a Day. It's the day. And so we had created things like, from my wife and I, like I was like, I'm a teacher, designer, or architect, not literally but figuratively, and I'm working on something really meaningful in the world, specific to corporate responsibility. My wife was like, I'm looking out and I see horses, and our kids are going to this really cool progressive school where they're being challenged in unique ways. And long story short, we got super clear and we created it on a piece of paper. We did a couple of iterations, and then you ask yourself, like, okay, well, what's preventing you from living that day? That's big magic, because for me, it was two things. It was ego and money. Ego being, I grew up being an athlete. I'm working at Nike. Who the F leaves Nike? Like, what, it's my identity.
Yeah.
And the other thing was financially. Is like, this is Nike. Like, we're doing well. I'm making money. Like, why would I want to leave this path? And once I reconciled those things, it became really easy, a lot easier. And so when I left, I didn't know about 7th generation, and that just popped up on my radar. They're like, hey, we're looking for a CMO. And I was like, this is it. And away I went. I subsequently have added an element, which is, there's some people that have so much clarity and are really good at things. They know what they want to do in life, and kudos to them. Like, that's not my gift. And I don't know it, nor do I really want to know, truthfully. And so when this idea of people surface, like, what's your meaning and purpose? Some people love it. It's been highly effective. For me, it's paralyzing. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, that's a tough conversation. But if I ask myself, what makes me feel free and what makes me feel alive? Like, what are the conditions that make me feel free and alive? Like, when you talked about the things that you were recognizing that were important to you, those were things that made you feel free and alive in a way that you can then easily jump into that next chapter because you had that level of clarity.
Yeah.
And that free and alive piece, like, in full transparency, I do really well when I'm empowered. When I'm not empowered, I'm a fraction of myself. And so freedom and aliveness for me is being in an environment where there's, like, just a real beautiful level of trust. And when that exists, I'm really good. It doesn't mean I just need to get my way every time. It's just, I want to be able to be empowered and have the autonomy and accountability to create. And so once again, Imagine a Day, my wife and I have done it a number of times. I do it when I'm stuck. And it's just, once again, for me, I think it brings about awareness for me. It's like, I got it. Okay. Good reminder. Check. And I can move on with confidence in the decision making. Once again, going from Nike to 7th generation, when everyone's like, I think you're a complete idiot. I was like, I'm really good. I've thought this through. Don't worry about me. I'm super comfortable with and excited about this decision.
Yeah. And a couple of things that jump out. One is, I think I reference this above the line insight that I learned from Jack Dangerman at Esri a lot, and audience members, or you for people who have been listening along, have context to it. And that's what it is. Above the line is context, the imagination, and below the line is content, and that automatic stimulus response function. And, we've talked a bit about this, and I think the imagine the day helps us to get above the line and to take a step back. And I think for me, what was missing in the story that I realized about Imagine the Day is it was the connection, the emotional connection. And I think, I don't know if it's just, a guy growing up in Gen X, and I sort of felt like it took me a really long time to be able to have emotional maturity and be able to actually be aware of the feelings I was feeling, and not just be like sucked below the line and be in this constant state of stimulus response and constant state of reaction, and to be able to use the emotion as signal. And if I was feeling afraid, I could have a dialogue with that fear and understand how to have strategies that could help me to be, leverage the fear, take it, use this weakness, if you will, or maybe not a weakness, but this emotion that used to debilitate me and debilitates a lot of people, and use it as a way to help me be, more alert or attuned or sense. I gotta, what do I do here? And I think with the Imagine the Day, as I went through it, the thing that you helped me to think through is, how do I want to be feeling when I'm doing this work? And it was like, I want to feel inspired and I want to feel energized. And, maybe there's some, when you're at Lulu, you had this whole thing about get off the mat, and you and your wife are, big yogis. And for me, yoga has been an incredible practice to help me get more in touch emotionally. Ironically, I don't know how it does it, but it does. And maybe, I guess I'm kind of just burying the headline that I think a lot of, our culture, seems to have men just stuff their emotions down and not be aware of the emotion. As I start to be more aware of how I'm feeling. And that's one of the things that you've been a great model for me, is that you're somebody that has been like an alpha dude in many ways, like a pro athlete, top exec, but you also have this empathy and this emotional, I would say, mastery, in many regards. And, I don't know, any sort of thoughts about that? I was kind of long winded, but I think it's important.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment. I mean, I think for me, like, there's one principle in my course about, honesty versus perfection. I think so often we strive to be perfect. And what I've discovered over the years is that when we strive to just be honest and transparent, like we get out of our head and work from our heart, I find that such a beautiful place. And it's not for everybody. And yes, some people can at times like take a swing at you for that. But I think what I found more often than not, that anytime there's a sense of honesty in a conversation, there's this like unbridled connective tissue, and I think deep resonance that happens in that moment. And I also think there's an energy thing. Like, my mom was a staunch feminist. And so I think having male and female energy, not one or the other, is super important. And so, I don't think we learn what it means to be human in business, but empathy is one of I think, the greatest superpowers. And yet we're not really taught to bring that as a condition in a business environment. And to me, it's everything. I pride myself on being with teams where there's a deep understanding for the essence of each other in a way that we can actually just work in really a state of flow and be really fluid. And that's not always allowed,
In that same breath, you taught me how to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure. And be honest and humble, and to help me dissolve Bravo, that I always had to have the answer. Or dissolve bravado is what I meant to say.
Yeah, I think about that like, I'm an introvert, and an introvert in a C-suite is an interesting cocktail, because I always talk, I got to have the corner seat. I can't sit in the middle. I observe. I'm literally a high observer. But one of my observations is more often than not, there's more statements than questions. And my dad would always, I would always come to my dad with a question and he would follow up with a question and it would drive me batshit crazy.
You're like F Socrates.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's why I think I love philosophy in school. I was like, I'm an economics major, but I just really want to take philosophy classes. But I think the role of inquiry is also a lost art. Like, you mentioned first principles. I mean, obviously everyone equates it to Musk, but really Aristotle is the forefounder of it. That's a beautiful way to approach things because you're not reacting to what is. You're reframing the conversation in a way that invites different possibility.
Yeah.
And to me, like, once again, I'm like, why are we not taught these things versus this mechanical rote nature of what we're taught in school, primarily business school? Because I'm like, I look out there in the world and I see all these amazing companies doing well, and they're breaking every damn rule out there for the most part.
Well, I think that's a very natural and perfect segue into what's on deck for you with Bonfire with Soul. Couple of questions I had was, maybe give us a taste of the course and maybe through a couple of the principles, but maybe you can, to catch the audience up, describe what it is, what is it, and to your, from the Nike insight, what emotion are you trying to create for the audience? What are you offering them? And maybe a little taste of what's on deck with the course.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One is all my yogi friends would say there's no masters, there's only constant learners. And I feel like Bonfire with Soul is a manifestation of 30 plus years of observation and learning. It's not seminal, thought that is the answer to everything, but it's a provocative effort to unlearn business as usual. Like, I half jokingly say my goal is to make Harvard Business School obsolete. And the half jokingly part is I actually believe that. I think if we learn differently, we would invite so much more possibility. And that's my thing, is like, I see possibility wasted because there's a culture of fear, or there's a lack of strategy, or lack of empathy, or lack of courage, or lack of boldness, or a lack of framing how, the opportunity. And so during COVID, I kind of did it just, I was like, you know what? I need a creative outlet. I'm going to create this thing called Bonfire with Soul, this masterclass online course. And I launched 2 cohorts. 1,000 people showed up from 35 countries and 6 continents, which kind of blew me away. But, one of the things for me is I don't believe demographic. Like, we're taught about, hey, what's the demographic? I think that's a secondary or tertiary conversation. I'm more fixated on what's the universal mindset that you want to throw out there in the world that can galvanize different people. And so for me, it was this mindset around optimistic rebels who feel there's a different path, not sure how to get there, and want to unlearn business as usual. And then I look at the demographics, which is like, okay, who showed up? And it was like I had execs from Patagonia, Nike, Apple. I had some guy making custom motorcycles in Tokyo. I had a coffee barista in Cornwall, England. I mean, it was engineers, university professors, it was designers, stay-at-home parents. It was all over the map. And then I paused it, which I think it's good to let things breathe for a while, because then I could just say, okay, well, what worked, what didn't, how would I evolve it? And now I'm launching the 3rd cohort, which kicks off October 6th.
Amazing. What were you most proud of or grateful for the first 2 cohorts?
I think the feedback was really profound. When you go back to what's the feeling, I want people to be awakened. I want people to be like, hey, inspired with a sense of hope and with combined with action, like, man, I don't have to settle. I always say the foe in Bonfire with Soul is the acceptance of the status quo. If you look at the culture of business today, only 80% of people aren't engaged at work. 45% of people won't wish their jobs on the worst enemies. We have scary Sundays and blue Mondays. I feel blessed that most of my career, I love Monday morning. I couldn't wait to go to work Monday morning. Like, I think back to my first job as an econ, and my boss was my age, and she was like one of the most gifted leaders I've ever had. Like, I just was like, this is amazing. Trust was omnipresent within the culture. I was like, who wouldn't want to work here?
Yep.
And so, but that, I think, just people walking away with, I didn't know why I signed up for this course. I didn't know what to expect. And by the way, when people say, what can I get from it? I don't answer that because everyone walks away with something different. But I think people being inspired with a new sense of hope, but also being willing to be not an antagonist, but an inspired protagonist on challenging things. One of my favorite moments was when one of the participants said, I am going to the CEO today to challenge something. And I am scared shitless, but I've got to do this. And she went, and it went really well. And my thing is, like, I want people to be out there, once again, as inspired protagonists in this world and this thing called business and life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's, and so is it, walk us through the course. Is it a week? What's the interval? Is it a weekly, meet a couple times a week? Is there coursework?
So real quickly, it's over the course of 7 weeks. It's online learning. Each Friday, I drop 2 principles, and then the following week, I invite a live guest speaker for each principle. So there's a guest speaker on Tuesday, a guest speaker on Thursday, and then we have instruction and Q&A on Friday. There's incredibly robust conversations within Slack. I think the first cohort alone had 4,000 Slack conversations, so it was awesome, actually. I think people helping one another. This year, I'm doing something a little bit unique in that for every ticket that someone purchases, they get to invite a +1.
Awesome. Love that.
Inspired. I'm an introvert, so if I'm thrust into a breakout group, I can do it, but man, it can take its toll.
Yeah.
But I've done a lot of research on the science of paired learning, to have a partner. The Patagonia folks that took the course talked about this. Like, it's just great to banter ideas and thoughts back and forth with one another. And the more I researched it, I was like, wow. So everyone buys a ticket, gets a +1.
Yeah. Well, if you have a buddy too, you're also accountable a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I just took my poetry class, and there was a partner that I had in that class, and it was just like, I was like, what are you hearing? Like, are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing, or what's your perspective? And it was invaluable in terms of raising my own level of learning capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that didn't come out right. It's more about, like, you want to, it's almost like play. You want to be able to, like, participate, and, you feel like, oh, if your friend's doing it, you want to, kind of pull your equal weight, and, not, yeah, at least that's how I would feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, well, when you're partnered, obviously then it is like, yeah, I need to do the work. I think that's part of the intention as well. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 7-week course. That's great. Learn a bunch of new stuff, make some new friends. And then is the idea that if is there a framework, if they have an idea they're workshopping, that out of the 7 weeks that there could be some chrysalis from or output, or be any thoughts about people that are trying to bring something to the world or to the market?
Yeah, everybody's different, but there were a number of, I go back to it's honoring for people the recognition around creating the conditions to flourish and what makes me feel free and alive. And because of that, there was a variety of people that went off to create new careers, new projects, new companies, different things outside business. And so once again, I think the beauty is it's different for everybody, but the goal is that it provokes some element of action and shift for people who feel like it's stuck, or it's just the status quo is not working for them.
Yeah, love it. And it's principle based. You have 12 principles.
12 principles, each comes with a specific burning question, so 12 burning questions. And then there's also a set of there's an exercise for each principle.
Fun. Awesome. And a couple of the principles are, we won't, no spoiler alert, but are there any that maybe you can give a little taste of 2 or 3 principles?
Well, the first one's cool. It's product is a mirror into your soul. And I think anything you create in life is a touch point that is a reflection. It basically says something about you, based really like how much rigor or care that you have in something. And it's not just a physical project or a digital project. It can be so many different things. And so that guest speaker is amazing. It's going to be Greg Hoffman, who's the former CMO and also design lead at Nike, who's since retired. He's just a wonderful thought leader. I love the idea of see, feel, trust. You know, how do you not convince people of something, but I think the idea for me is more around you ask the question, all right, how do we get people to see this, feel it, and trust it? I had to do that with Bonfire with Soul. I didn't spend $1 marketing Bonfire with Soul. And when I say that, people are like, well, then how the hell you did it? How'd you do it? And I was like, I focused on, I need people to see, feel, and trust this. So I did it through partnership with the Do Lectures and some other means. But that was an incredibly effective framework for me in terms of building something.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. And again, being attuned to the territory or the terrain and finding a partner that was kind of, aligned to that market and helping get the word out. I mean, that's all just brilliant. Yeah.
It was kind of, I don't know if it's like a mythical thing, but like Tim Ferriss, I remember when he created 4 Hour Work Week, the publisher was like, hey, you got to go on a book tour. And he's like, I'm not going on a book tour. I'm going to send this book to like 6 people. And, he sent it to 6 people who were like, this book's
right 6. Yeah.
And I do think like, that goes back. He put it in the hands of where people could see, feel, and trust. So if one of those 6 is like, a revered figure in the world of certain things, and like this book is amazing, all your tendency is to be like, all right, I should check out this book.
Yeah. If people want to learn more, best place to go would be bonfirewithsoul.com. Fair to say?
That's correct. Yeah. So right now we're just at the bottom of the website. If you're interested, you can sign up for course info. And then between September 11th and September 22nd is when tickets are being offered.
All right, cool. So, and as I always say, cheap is often more expensive in the long run. So these tickets are not cheap. They're $800, $799 US. But the value, I think, is very, very high. And if anybody wanted to do the course with me, I'd be happy to be your partner. So first come, first serve on that offer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I set up the pricing in this way. That was the accessibility comes from the +1. So
totally.
The course is, $400 if you split the cost.
Yep.
Over 7 weeks. And so I find, from a value proposition, everyone will determine what's the value for them. But that was my thinking for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done a bunch of this coursework, and I've done Seth Godin stuff. I mean, every time I spent money on myself, educating myself, the ROI has just been nonlinear 10x.
Yeah, well, it's like I just took this poetry class and it was $400 and it was 7 weeks, and I was like, this was the most amazing experience. Like the value proposition around it for me was exponential.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to join along. I'm super excited about it. I did the first cohort, and it was awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see number 3, and thank you for doing it. I mean, this is epic, brilliant, and I can't stress how excited I am that this stuff is out there, and not to oversell it, but anybody that's at least interested, wants to talk to me more about it, by all means, let me know. Yeah. Anything else to say on that? I want to kind of flip the page and also this is going to be an extra special episode. We've gone a little long, everybody. So thanks for being kind of on the journey with us. And I want to be sensitive to your time, Duke, but anything else on Bonfire before we turn the page to and kind of round third base on the conversation?
No, I'm good. Let's bring it home.
Yeah, bring it home. All right. So, the FAQ on the site is great. So bonfirewithsoul.com. So check that out. Yeah. So turning the page, humanizing success. One of the core themes of the show is humanizing success. And better than most, some of the challenges I've overcome. And I definitely believe the bigger the breakdown, the bigger the breakthrough. And having said that, is there a challenge personally or professionally that you've dealt with that you're comfortable sharing publicly? And how'd you get over the hurdle, and what gift did that pain give you, Duke?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the question. By the way, when you're talking about when you took the big leap, you forgot Digital Family Reunion, which was a monument unto itself. What's interesting is I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to a boarding school, a private school in Connecticut for my junior and senior year. And I was taking this English class when I first got there, and we had summer reading. And I remember it was Tess of the Dubervilles, Great Gatsby, and The Grapes of Wrath. And the teacher was in their small classrooms, and the teacher was like, all right, let's talk about the metaphors in The Great Gatsby. And I remember the student, Liz, stood up and shared. And I was like, I don't think I read the same book, because what she's sharing and I turtled. I was like, all my confidence in that moment was gone. And I didn't intentionally set out to do this, but I didn't speak in class for the rest of the 2 years or all throughout college. I had a massive phobia of speaking. Mm-hmm. And I even took a public speaking class my senior year in university, and then I bailed on it halfway through because I was like, I can't do this. And so lo and behold, I then am applying for this Nike Econ job, and the whole premise is you got to go and speak all the time at stores and events. So I was like, I got to figure it out. And I just kind of fought my way through it. But then I met the speaking coach early on at Nike, and she said something to me that was so marvelous. She's like, everything, when you try to communicate, you're in your head. So just drop down to the heart.
Amen. Yeah.
And I was like, what? And then we practiced it. It was like a muscle. I just kept practicing and practicing. And Kirigi for me, was like the greatest unlock, because I went from someone who didn't have any confidence in myself or to be able to share. Not that I was overconfident, but I was confident enough to be able to communicate and articulate in a unique, in a way I wanted to. And like when I do talks, I can't memorize things. That's not my genius. All right, I'm dropping in here what feels right from here. But that gift that program gave me was immeasurable, because I remember my dad, I would get my report cards from boarding school, and it said Duke doesn't speak in class. My dad would be like, I don't care if you get a D. Just let it say that you spoke up in class. Like, please. Like, yeah. I'm like, I'm trying, but it's a block for me. And, I think I share that with a lot of people who are afraid to public speak. And I'm just like, I get it, because everyone's judging everything. But I do believe when we drop in from, down from our head to our heart, and we just work more from there than anything, it creates an environment more often than not that is rich and bountiful for everybody, but especially myself in terms of my own well-being. Yeah.
And the gift is you're now this incredible teacher to so many of us. So, and with incredible wisdom to share, and your love of language to, kind of little sprinkles on top. I mean, it's one of the things I love about this show is I get to learn all these things about friends and people that I care about and connected to that I might not have known if I didn't have even this kind of, opportunity to. So that's, thanks for sharing that. And, I can relate to that in many regards. And, I'm still learning how to drop from the head to the heart when I publicly speak. And this show has really helped me do that a bunch. And even just being honest about the things that, like, I was embarrassed about or naive or, vain about. I think it's just like people, by and large, are so generous when you're just like real with them. And,
I think that's another great way to phrase it. Like, it's the Jay-Z real, recognize real. I think when you show up real, and that's when you're working from your heart more often than it is, that tends to be real. People can feel that, and your journey, Curdy D, from that bathroom to where you were today, it's been inspiring for me. Like, I go back to mentoring and being mentored. I just think you've shown me that there's moments where there's courage and conviction. And I also love the rigor. Like, you just don't jump into anything without really taking the time to understand the essence of it. So going back to empathy, like whether it's people or an industry, like you're maniacal on that. And it's just been fun to watch you, man. It really has. And
thanks.
Yeah, I find a lot of nutrition in learning and hearing about your escapades. And
it's fun, let's keep it going. And now I can you can see how bad I suck at golf, and that's the next thing I'm working on. So
it's all good, man. It's a tough game, and you're doing great.
I won the wave of the day at Slater Surf Ranch, so I could check that off the list.
And, That's right. I saw that. You and the green room, beautiful, man.
So few rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap it up. But who's the best boss you ever had, and why?
That's tough. I mean, my first boss, but I'm going to say Chris Zimmerman, who's now the president of the St. Louis Blues. He was the president of Bauer, or CEO, and he just taught me about empathy and vision and the role to play in getting to move an entire culture.
Love that. I'll have to send this to Chris. Chris, you are the man. You know how much I love music, and I know you love music. We've seen some cool bands, including Aaron Embry at Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros at UCLA, and more. And if you could magically have any band, musician, artist, rapper, singer, songwriter, doesn't matter who, but you could have them play anywhere, any venue in the world or on another planet, past, present, or future. I know it's a pretty wild question. Who would it be and where?
As a kid and growing up in the 60s and 70s, you couldn't help but love the Beatles. I remember I had a tape cassette and I just played the Beatles nonstop. And I'm also really intrigued by like the human dynamic with that group. So I know it's probably shared by others, but I love the Beatles would be cool, but I would love it to be in like some small venue, like the Belly Up Bar in Solano Beach, or whatever that bar's called down in San Diego. Some small venue.
Yeah, fun. Awesome. So in closing, Duke, how can our audience be helpful to you?
I think the biggest thing for me is for people to ask themselves, like, what are the conditions to feel free and alive, and ask themselves, like, if they're not living into that, why not? And having the courage not to be an antagonist, but an inspired protagonist that, has the courage to challenge the status quo when it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Be your own hero and make heroes out of others. Yeah.
I like that.
Amen. If people wanted to get in touch, is there any channel that would be a good channel for folks to follow along online that you prefer?
Yeah, preference is LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, I'm open and accessible and happy to chat or connect with anybody. And then also bonfirewithsoul.com if people want to be in the communication around that.
Awesome. Well, that sounds awesome. Duke Stump, you are the man, the myth, the legend, one of my favorite humans on the planet. It was amazing to spend a little extra time with you today. And way to light up the bonfire and strike up the band. And so much love and gratitude to you and Molly and the girls. And I can't wait to see you soon. Hopefully on a golf course and definitely an online Bonfire with Soul course too.
Curdy D, thanks, man. Honored and humbled to be a part of this combo with you. Thank you.
Thanks again to Duke Stump for being our guest, for being a profound mentor to me, great friend. And I recommend checking out Bonfire with Soul, and I promise you'll be glad you did. I'm at Curdy D on Twitter and Instagram, also Kurt to Deredix on LinkedIn. Please follow, say hi. Please do give a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/Curdy D. Until next time, Curdy D loves you.